Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cutting the Grooves of History with your three sharp needles, Gavin Rice, Jack Stanley, and Ahmed Abel, who is our first guest today. And he's going to have the floor today. We're going to talk all about reproducers, paper mache horns, and all of the wonderful thing that he builds, 3D prints, and et cetera, et cetera. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of what you do.
Hello, evening all. Well, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. So I'm Ahmed. I'm based down in south of England. And what do I do? Um, I tinker with stuff. That's my specialty. I'm a tinkerer. And that's sort of what got me into phonographs and gramophones to begin with. It's the mechanics of it all and seeing it tick that just does it for me. I think that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, I love it. And many collectors are definitely tinkerers, but none like you. You are a
Nah.
proper tinkerer, that is for sure. So I'm really
You
excited
brought
to have.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm 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 an amateur tinkerer.
you brought tinkering to a new level, I must say.
exactly,
Nah, well, thank you very much.
exactly. That's why I'm very excited to have him as our first guest on the
Hmm.
show ever.
Ditto, ditto.
So, first, my question is to you. Number one, first of all, what got you into phonographs and gramophones in the first place?
Ooh, was an HMV 101. So it's they're dangerous. And I still have a soft spot for them.
Yeah.
So I'd always wanted a gramophone, but I've never actually kind of actively gone and got one. One day, as I was in an antique shop down in Surrey, so that's again south of England. And as it happens, one of the chaps who sells stuff in there is a gramophone collector.
Mm.
And what he does is every now and again, he puts something in the shop. So there was this beautiful 101. I was like, can you play it? He said, yes. He played it. He took my money and rest is history. It's just one big at two, we got 10, 20,
Mm-hmm.
15, and yeah.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, that's usually how it starts. Someone walks into an antique shop, sees either like a little portable or like a floor model, phonograph,
Well,
gramophone, whatever.
it's really rare here to see a gramophone, let alone a working one in good condition in an
True.
antique shop. It's yeah. So that was sheer luck that
Yeah.
he was someone who knew what he was doing. So he had
Mm-hmm.
good working stuff and good cosmetic condition as well.
Good.
Mhm.
Now, going off of that, just another question for you. Um, since you mentioned you're from the southern England, right? What are the challenges or maybe pros and cons of being a phonograph gramophone collector in England? Because I know it's very challenging because the phonograph and gramophone was invented in the United States and Canada. So I'm just curious if you have any pros or cons that you would think of being a collector in
Mm.
Europe.
Um, Again, it's an interesting one, which one I haven't really thought of before. I think there's a lot of pros. That's for sure. I mean, we've got a lot of. I mean, something like that Lumiere, that's British through and through. You wouldn't see that in
Yeah,
over your side.
right.
And my beloved EMGs as well. That's
True.
I'm at the home of the EMG down in England. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's kind of uh, weird and quirky, which is what I like. But equally, there isn't. It's kind of I'm always jealous of is all the fantastic shows that you have. It's kind of all the correct collector shows and fairs that you have over there, and the scale of them is just incredible.
Hmm.
Whereas we haven't got anything of that scale down here at
Yeah.
all. So yeah, so whenever I see this on Facebook, I'm like, oh, I'm jealous. But equally, it's good we haven't got anything like that because I wouldn't be able, to eat or drink or do anything else.
So
You'd have
much
to
money
drag,
would be spent.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'd have to drag me out screaming and kicking.
I feel that. Yeah. Yeah.
Equally, because it's a smaller country. It's not a small country, but it's a smaller country. If anything turns up anywhere in the country, just jump in the car and go up. Worst case scenario, it's a 7-hour drive.
True.
It's not too bad.
That's true. Yeah. And your country is home of the infamous HMV 102 and 101, so much easier to find over there than here, everyone loves those
There should
machines.
be a mess of them. there should be all over the place, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
They're absolutely everywhere. Yeah. The 101s and the 102s in here are absolutely everywhere. You do get ones obviously that are a lot more common than others. So the black ones are a lot more common than the colored ones, and even the colored ones, different ones, are more common than others. But you know, if I want a new 101 or a 102 now, I'm confident I can get my hands on one within an hour.
Yeah, that's like for
Yeah.
us, that's like we have to like if there's one listed on like online, you know, it's gone within an hour or within 30 minutes, you know. So
Yeah.
that's a very good point. You know, the machines over there are just fantastic machines. You know, and I've heard them like when I went to Ireland, I heard some of the HMV machines and compared to American machines, they're just incredible, like the way they're designed. And you know, so that's a very good point. Your machines are very sophisticated over there.
But that's saying that we haven't got any of the Edisons. And I'm
True.
talking in particular about the diamond disc machines.
Hmm.
So somehow I've managed to get my hands on a C250. It's just crazy. It's a crazy machine. Whereas I'm fully aware that's quite common over there, whereas down here it is not at all.
Yeah.
And it's just the complexity of it as well. I mean, the mute ball
The ball,
thingy
yeah.
bob, that's just crazy. It's just the amount of work that's gone into it, the design of it. I mean, when I first got it, the door was locked, so I wasn't entirely sure if it had any records in there, if there was anything in there, if it was empty. So I was getting out of the car, and there was two of us, and it was a struggle getting it out of the car. So much so that I thought it was full of records. And when I finally managed to open it up, I was thoroughly disappointed that nope, it's just a heavy beast that it wasn't full of anything.
Yes. Yep.
They're
Yeah.
amazingly over-engineered.
Exactly.
It's
It's
an
just a,
amazing product. Yeah. You know,
exactly.
when Edison was developing, he had to go through and go against every patent that existed.
Hmm.
And also, he was annoyed when he would work with the Victor machines or the Columbia machines with all their problems. So he had inherent fixes that he added in there, and each thing added to the weight. I mean, they're like Sherman tanks. I mean, they're incredible.
Yes, exactly, and it's beautiful. The design of it is beautiful as well. And I mean, the sound you get out of it, not just in terms of quality, but in terms of volume, out of that dinky acoustic system, and it is dinky, is again incredible. You know, how does he do it? I have no idea, but it is just fantastic. The volume and the clarity you get out of what is a relatively small horn and a relatively short, you know, acoustic system is fantastic.
Wonderful.
I got a question for you. When we're talking about you starting this collecting freeze, obviously you were familiar with early recording before you started looking for it. What really,
Yes.
what was the genesis of this whole thing? Was there, when you were growing up, did you see that stuff, or did someone you know have something?
No, no, I didn't have any of that growing up at all. But again, growing up, I've always tinkered with stuff. I mean, so many Windows 95 machines met their demise in my hands. I mean, I've learned you shouldn't be swapping RAM cards on a computer that's switched on the hard way. As a 9-year-old, you know, so I've been tinkering with stuff since forever. Technology in particular, and I mean, vintage technology is something that I've always had an interest in. So stuff that I've been reading about, been hearing about, been looking up online. The wonders of YouTube's and so on. So yes, I was definitely familiar with it, but as I kind of explored it more, it became quite apparent that a lot of you know what people think these machines can do, what people think these machines can sound like or should sound like, is absolutely and utterly wrong. A well-tuned machine, even a humble 101, can sound absolutely fantastic. Whereas what you get in films or in videos or what have you, just scratchy, horrible kind of, which is exactly why I didn't actively seek them to begin with, because it just sounds, you know, if you look at videos or whatever in films and what have you, just they sound scratchy and wobbly and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sad.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't make you want to go and get one, does it?
it's almost a part of popular culture if you think about it. When you look at a movie, they automatically, I learned this the hard way when I was asked to make some recordings and put it on, and they made them scratchy. And I had worked so hard to make them sound so good, and I was shocked. But that's what you experience. I mean, that's,
Well,
and
that's
then you
it.
just, and you've
Yeah.
proved that very wrong.
And that's exactly it. So it's, I mean, I've I have the privilege of listening to these machines day in and day out, and every now and again I'd have a record on, be like, but how could it be? There isn't. It is just all mechanical, beginning to end, and you can hear the singer in front of the orchestra, and you can hear the drums over there, and you can hear this down here, and it just doesn't make any sense because it's coming out of a single horn. Was recorded in mono, it's playing out in mono, but I can hear it in 3D, which does not make any sense, which is fun.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Keeps the mystery and the magic.
Yes. Now, this is my question that I've been wondering for a while. You are very knowledgeable on EMG reproducers. What was your first experience tinkering with a reproducer, and did it go well or did it go bad?
Ooh, so my first experience would have been that 101, which did have a pot metal back. So nah, I did manage to open it up. So that, yeah, I did manage to open it up in one piece as well.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was that realization and that was perhaps 3-4 months in. So I'd been using the machine for a while, and my assumption at that point was, yeah, it sounds buzzy because it's ancient, and it's just what it is.
Right.
And it wasn't until I opened it up and I've done it up and I put it back on, I thought, all that buzz is gone. It sounds lovely. That doesn't make any sense. Take it out again, tinker a bit more, put it back on. Oh, listen to that bass line. That sounds fantastic. And that's just, yeah, and that's how it came in, and started fiddling about with different gasket materials, different this and different that, and all the
Yeah.
rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because gasket material is not exactly readily available in the UK. Like in the USA, there's people who make reproduction gaskets. I know they could obviously ship it to England, but that would just take a while. So,
And
actually,
it's
what
so
were some?
expensive, the shipping.
Yeah, it's very expensive. So, what material did you use for gaskets?
Ooh, I, depends on the sound box. I've
I
got
see.
a drawer full of all sorts of different gasket materials and bits of rubber and bits of this and bits of that I just play around with. Um, for my standard gasketing, it's 3mm silicone tubing, not silicone, latex tubing, which I think last time I ordered it came in from China. Yeah, I think it's used for gosh, whatchamacallit, catapults. I think they're kind of little, that's
Oh,
what it's called.
slingshots.
Yeah, thank you. See, I've gone a bit too ancient.
Yeah, true. I find myself doing that.
Um, yeah, so that's, I think, what they're used for. So that's what I
Hmm.
get. I've again played around with different materials until I found the one I like. Uh, Not that there isn't enough information online. There is plenty of information online that tells you this is what you should be using and that's what you should be using. But equally, I like to experiment with stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
it's if it's common wisdom to do it in a particular way, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way, does it? Half the fun is playing around with stuff and seeing what comes out. If it works, happy days. If it doesn't, happy days.
True. Very good. Um, One more question just about the HMV 101 versus 102. Which type of machine, which portable do you prefer, the 101 or the 102? Because a lot of people have mixed opinions on which is the better one or which sounds richer, etc. I'm just curious to hear what you think about it.
That's gonna get me in trouble, that one. Most people absolutely love the 102 and swear by the 102, whereas my favorite is the 101.
Hmm.
It's just I like the sound of it. It sounds richer to my ears, and the aesthetic of it I prefer over the 102 as well.
Yeah.
So aesthetically and acoustically, I prefer it. Um, but that is knowing its limitations. So I wouldn't put a mid-40s record on it because that's just silly.
Yeah.
So as long as you're playing, you know, what it's meant to be playing, it's a fantastic machine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The the HMV number fours are such a surprisingly amazing sounding sound box, and like, um that's I will have to agree with you. The 101 aesthetically definitely is way more appealing. And also I like knowing that it's earlier than a 102, because those were manufactured from 1927 to what, 29?
The
Or was it
101s
just
A little
until
later. A little later.
31 off the top of my head,
okay?
31, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not,
because
so yeah,
they
this is not my cup.
eventually had an automatic brake and all
Right.
that sort of lovely stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, no, they're aesthetically, and so that's a very
I
good
have
point.
to I have to come in with a third and agree. Um, I have a 101, a 102, and an 88A.
I
I
don't know
like the
why.
88A
Oh,
better
brilliant.
than the 102. I think it
Wow.
has a much better sound, but the 101 is by far my favorite. It's just a richer sound.
Yeah, that's true.
The others are louder and harsher.
Hmm.
That's it. So I find the 102 a bit shrill.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it's the aluminum diaphragm, the way it was
Mm.
made, honestly, because the mica just it's really large, so it handles the vibration better, and I think it sends it down the tone arm. I think the HMV 102, the tone arm is, I think just because it's really big, that may have a reason why it's so shrill. I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
definitely.
I don't understand why they made it so big. If you don't want, you want your acoustic system to just exponentially grow, not just kind of go poof.
I know, like like
Well,
all of a
yeah,
sudden, yeah. That's
talking
probably
of
why.
mica diaphragms, I had a mica diaphragm soundbox playing earlier, and the light caught it just at the right angle, and I can see it vibrating, and I was like, "Oh, this is brilliant!" Yeah.
Yeah.
You saw it vibrating
Well, yeah,
with the light?
yeah. The light hit at just the right angle. You can just see how it's flexing. So you can see the so it had a reflection of my curtains on it, and the curtains have a bit of a pattern on them, and you can just see how it's flexing in and out, and the pattern is just getting a bit distorted. It was brilliant, just
That
brilliant.
is cool. I have to see if I can try and
Ah,
figure
Now,
that out.
here's the thing, probably that's different. You're using a very different material for your gasketing rather than the hard rubber.
yep.
We generally use the rubber, and I don't think that vibrates anywhere or has that ability like
That's
what you're
true. So
using.
on yeah, so on the particular soundbox, yeah, so that had rubber gaskets, really nice, flexible rubber gaskets, not hard rubber. So that might be it. But alas, it was yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks it's cool, Gavin. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this is brilliant.
I wish I could see that. That is phenomenal. It's, yeah,
You know,
like
what, I'll
my
I'll try and record it because it's just if anything demonstrates how it all works, that is it.
Yeah.
So I'll try and record it. I'll see how that works.
now, going on to the wonderful EMG. What was your first EMG you've ever purchased?
Ooh, ever purchase. So that was my Mark 8. So that's the uh, it's a you've seen it, have you, in all my recordings? So it's the one with the straight horn.
Right.
Uh, and up until that point, the only one I'd heard in person is a Mark 9 with a Mark 10 horn. Is that a Mark 10 horn? Yes, it was a Mark 10 horn. And um, the Vintage Wireless and TV Museum in London. So they had it's a fantastic museum. If you're ever down in London, do take a look. They had some sort of a do over a summer, and I spotted that, they're going to have that there. I was like, all right, I need to go and actually hear that in person because I've read so much about it. But again, up until that point, my assumption was it's only going to be just a bigger, louder machine, because why wouldn't it be?
Right.
And I go in, and they had all the things playing, and then came that one, and they put it on, and I was standing in front of it. I was like, nope, there's not just a bigger and louder machine. I want one of those. And just as it happens, that I ended up with my Mark 8, and the rest is history. Again,
Fantastic.
that was brilliant. So that came in. It had been with the same person for 40 years. But they hadn't been using it. So they
Wow.
had it stored in a basement, not being used, which is
Wow.
sad.
Mm.
Perhaps for the education for everybody watching, could you kind of explain the EMG machine? Because a lot of people have seen it, but they really don't know much more than just seeing
Yeah.
it.
So kind of, how would I describe them? So they're boutique machines. So they were a boutique gramophone manufacturer. So everything was made by hand. Nothing is mass manufactured. The whole premise was it's a pursuit for the best sound possible, above anything else, so above the aesthetic of it, above the size of it, hence the ludicrously huge horns. I mean, they're ridiculous contraptions, they're just crazy. But that didn't matter, because what mattered is getting the best sound out of it. So it was all based on sound science. So nothing was just, we'll make it look this way because we want it to look this way, that looks better. Nothing was, there was no compromise on, well, the horn should be round, but let's make it square so we can fit it in a cabinet or whatever. None of that. And that's why, nearly a century on, they're still singing and singing beautifully.
That's an amazing thing. Just a wonder about, like, with the reproducers. Is there an ability to adjust the weight on the record?
It's not the weight, it's the design of the reproducers allow for quite literally infinite adjustment of the sound you get out of it. There are so many different points on the reproducer that could be adjusted ever so slightly this way or that way to get slightly thinner sound, slightly bassier sound, slightly more open sound, slightly more closed sound, and so on and so forth. You can literally spend months playing around with the sound box to say, how it could sound in different configurations. It's mad. But equally, once you've got all of that just right, oh, it sounds so beautiful.
Mm.
Did you
Once
find that? Oh, sorry.
No, it's right.
Did you find that did you end up using a different type of gasketing material? Did you experiment with that? Did you find that
Yes, of course.
assisted greatly?
Yes, of course. Different gasketing, different washers, different types of leather for the washers, and yeah. I mean, you should see my sound boxes a bit up close and personal. The amount of different bits and bobs here and there, just so that everything is just the way I want it. They're heavily modified sound boxes, I'd say.
Mhm.
But they were doing that at the time. There is the very famous Mr. Wilde, who used to tune up their sound boxes. So the Meltrope sound boxes, he'd put bits of leather under the ball bearings, and so on and so forth. So even back then, they were adjusting them and putting all sorts of different washers and what have you, either to limit unwanted vibrations or to hold things in a particular way, or again, infinite fun.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, Now, I know that the EMG reproduces the disc's sound beautifully. Jack, have you heard an EMG before? I definitely know you have.
Yeah, I have.
I've
Yeah,
heard them, and
yeah.
I can safely agree with you that they are some of the finest sounding acoustic phonographs ever. And I'm curious, what is your favorite genre of music to reproduce the sound with on the EMG? Like, if you had a go-to disc that someone were to say, "What is your favorite thing to play on your EMG?" What would you pick? And that may be a tricky question, but
Oh, it is a very tricky question because it depends on depends on the situation, depends on the person, whether they've whether they've heard a gramophone before or not as well. So my favorite would be opera. But if opera is not your thing and you've never heard a gramophone before, and I want to show you what one can do, I wouldn't probably start with opera. So I'd put some, jazz or something of that description on, gets people fun and excited and happy
yeah.
dancing. Uh, but it's opera would be my because with the right desk, when it's properly set up, it's like they're singing live for you, and it's really uncanny. You know, it's like it's being sung live in your living room. What else can you ask for?
Wow, that's amazing.
I,
Yeah.
just a question on records, acoustic recording.
Mhm.
Are they, do they come out better on that machine, or do you
Yes,
find, is it just electrics, or is it both? It's
both. Both, absolutely both. And it's really interesting with the acoustic machine records because they come out. You can you can hear the recording horn. If
yeah, yeah.
so, it comes out with the imaging such that you can actually hear the person behind the recording horn. So you can just see it. Maybe it's just me. I am slightly
No,
mad,
no,
and I
I know
appreciate
what you're
that.
saying.
But
You
Yeah.
can
yeah,
hear that sound.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, you can hear the singer, you can hear the instruments, you can hear them in space as well,
Hmm.
True.
and you can hear the horn, which is just again, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
I guess that one thing with that I hear a lot, and I imagine is ridiculously amplified by the MGs, is when they blow wax, which you often hear. You can hear it. It goes, you know, you get that rumble. It must be an absolute roar.
No, I must admit, I haven't spotted that yet, but
Oh, I
yeah.
have to send you some records.
Well,
But
uh,
again, it's a matter of pairing the right soundbox and the right machine for the record.
Mm, sure.
So I would often swap sound boxes for a particular recording. So I have a sound box that's um, that's tuned up better to handle challenging sopranos, and one that's tuned up better to handle a lovely deep bass sort of thing. So I'd swap them around so that it's the right record for the right soundbox for the right recording, and
Mhm.
equally the right machine for the right recording. So an acoustic recording to my ears sounds a lot better on the smaller Mark 8 than it sounds on the Expert, which is a much bigger horn. Um, yeah, why? I'm not entirely sure, but it does.
mhm. Um, I have another question for you. What are some upcoming projects that you are currently working on? If they're top secret, feel free to not share, but what are some new, tinkering things, projects that you're working on that you'd like to share about?
Oh, uh, there is always a lot going on in my head in terms of ideas of things I want to be playing with. It's actually having the time to sit down and do something about it. Um, so kind of next on top of the list is going back to that uh, towards the end of last year. I did an Edison adapter to play Edison records on my EMGs. I need to revisit that one. It needs a bit more tuning up. Plus, I need to find a way to make it to bring the cost of it down. So I need to find a way of doing it without having to use a proper Edison stylus for it.
Mhm.
So that's next on my list. I have a couple of ideas to play around with, and we'll see how that works out. Plus, there is the Lumiere attachment as well,
Mhm.
which needs further tinkering. So I like the quality of the voice coming out of it, but I want to increase the volume. So yeah,
Beautiful.
some ideas as to how I might be able to do that, but we'll see how they play out. Sometimes things just work, and sometimes work in theory,
Mhm.
but not in practice. So.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a part of it. Um, Another thing, do you have much experience with cylinder phonographs at all in the UK? Do you have any currently?
Yeah, so I've reduced them. So kind of I came to a point last year where I reduced my machines to anything that I haven't used for 6 to 12 months went. So the only one I'm left with now is my Fireside. So I've got
Mm.
a Fireside with a signet horn, which
Oh.
again are quite uncommon this side of the pond. You don't see them that often, uh, mostly because it's lovely. It's just a beautiful piece to look at.
Mhm.
And I've got a Model R reproducer on it, which absolutely wipes the floor with the Model H. It absolutely wipes the floor with it. It just sings.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course.
I was
Absolutely.
wondering, with your inventive proclivity, that when you are tinkering with the EMGs and that whole technology and that whole idea, have you tinkered with the idea of playing cylinders in somewhat of a similar fashion?
Of course I have. Of course I have. Uh, have I done anything about it yet? No, not really. But yes, of course I have.
Because my question with that would be is when you get to the different types of cylinders, first off, when they're transcribed, it's going to be it's a totally different animal. It should prove interesting when you have a
Yes, and
horn and
again, there's just so much goodness in these grooves that's just waiting to be heard. Just earlier today was someone on one of the British forums demonstrating a machine he had put together so that it's exceedingly the speed of it is just beautifully steady. And he's used the modern reproducer for the sound, and the transfers are just beautiful, really beautiful. So it's just there is so much goodness in these grooves that's waiting to be heard.
I think that's a very important part of this whole thing, that you are a conduit, kind of like taking that old technology and giving it a whole new life and new ears in a sense. I
Mhm.
think
Yeah,
it's
and I think
important.
it's unfortunate. I think we don't have that many younger people coming in, joining the hobby, and I think it's just not that much is being done to promote it. If you see what I mean, to talk about it, to get people excited, and
Oh, I agree.
and to come in, and yeah.
I look at you two, you know, and like when I started, just to give you an idea, I put this out here. This was the only thing available. This was my Bible. This is called The Fabulous Phonograph. As you can see, it's pretty well beat,
Oh, brilliant.
and it's completely filled with notes. I added like 5 chapters of notes on my own because there was nothing.
Mhm.
Mm.
Today, you have the internet. You have amazing ways of deferring information, and you just didn't have anything years ago. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know what the allure was. Perhaps for myself, when I was a little kid, my toy records were 78s. So it was part of what was. I mean, I felt comfortable with
Mm.
the 78 because I played with them when I was a kid. I knew what they were. Now it's such a foreign thing. I mean, a record. Well, now we have vinyls, which is interesting. But in a sense, people kind of look at them like, wow, that it's still an odd thing. And I
Yeah,
imagine there has to be a way to reach young people in a different way.
it's funny you say that. Often enough, well, pre-COVID anyhow, I used to take the phonographs, well, the portables anyhow, they're out quite often,
Mhm.
and
I remember.
explaining them to the kids is just mind blowing. You can just see their minds
Oh
blown.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. Their minds explode. Yeah.
And to be fair, even their parents, because they used to take out cylinder phonographs as well, specifically for the parents, because I'm 100% confident they wouldn't have seen them before. And you can just see that. But how does it work? Where's the record? And it's, well, that's the record. But how does it work? Um, I think the allure of it now is the exact opposite of what you're saying, Jack, is because it's so many people now have grown up without any physical media of any
Mhm.
description. I mean, I'm old enough to have had cassettes back in my day. So I've had cassette tapes and I've had CDs. So I'm relatively used to physical media, although as a young lad, as it was a teenager, I didn't really have any CDs. It was all MP3s and what have you on the good old dial-up interwebs. Um, so growing up, I didn't really have much in terms of physical media, and it's the physicalness of it that's attracted me to begin with. Because I
Mhm.
mean, I've moved recently, and I most definitely don't recommend moving with a record collection and a ton of stupidly large machines.
Oh yeah.
I don't recommend it. And it did make me wonder, what's wrong with Spotify? It's it's well, first of all, it's too convenient. Plus, most of the transfers just sound. Eh.
Oh, they are god awful.
That's exactly
Oh
what I was
my
trying not to say,
god.
but they're just horrid.
They are the worst.
They're
There are like
horrid.
maybe like one or two good ones, but they're just so like bubbly and like it's just
They're horrid. I had for the car. I had a set of Cuttin Flagstad CDs in the car for long journeys, and you'd put it on, and it just sounds atrocious. Knowing that Cuttin isn't that long ago, so we're talking 30s, 40s recordings. We're not talking teens or 20s. It just sounds awful.
mhm.
But some of these, I have them on 78, and I put them on, and the original recording is just beautiful. The
Mm.
fidelity in it, it's just
Yeah.
gorgeous. But the transfer is meh. And
Yeah.
sadly, a lot of people, that is the only version they will hear, which is sad.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. And I think that also, I think a lot of technicians, historians, and the like poo-poo the idea of an acoustic transfer. They will automatically say, well, an electric transfer, an electronic transfer is going to be much better. And yet, if you look at the acoustic, I think it's phenomenal.
There is one British company whose name escapes me, who've done acoustic transfers. Um, gosh, what are they
Yeah, I
called?
know who you're talking about. Yes, yes.
So they
Um,
did they did make a custom-made exponential horn, huge horn, that they did all the transfers with, and you can see the difference in their particular transfers, but their name escapes me. Doesn't help. It's nearly 10 o'clock, so yeah, I'll blame it on the time.
Exactly. I know. I can't remember either, but yeah.
I know, I think, didn't they do like a number of the Caruso recordings via with a big horn and record it through the horn?
The
Something.
recordings, and I find the recordings quite interesting as well, because it's how did they get that fidelity recorded all acoustically?
I
No,
got to talk
yeah.
to I got to talk to a few people years ago who had worked at Victor. Um, they were like 80 something when I talked to them, but they said they would use cotton at times in the recording horn if it was too strong,
Mhm.
or they would turn the horn a little bit off, and they'd have the singers like basically reflect the voice off the walls and stuff like that.
Yes.
It's kind of fascinating. I mean, there had to be a whole myriad of tricks. And the sad
Yes,
part with
yeah,
recording tricks is no one wanted to write them down because they were secret.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. So kind of when you think about the machines of the time of the acoustic era with, their mica diaphragms, relatively small sound boxes and so on, you can just see how, if you try to record that in something of that description, it just wouldn't work. Whereas clearly it does. Whatever they were doing it very, very well. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the acoustical recording method is a magical thing. It's it really is amazing. And like some people actually refer to it as magic, and it was referred to magic back then, even. So um, yeah, the way I can only even I have my own tricks when I do acoustic recording. So there's many tricks that you just figure out on your own after doing it for so long. And I actually can confirm people would stick cotton in the horn. I even do that when doing like um, usually when you would have a split horn, like there's one horn at a singer and one horn on the band, you would actually stick a little bit of cotton in the singer's horn because the band is going to record better without the cotton, but the singer's going to overpower the band. So you have to use the cotton to make sure the singer doesn't overpower the groove, basically. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing.
yeah, and it had to be an amazing thing. I remember years ago there was a collection of Edison recording artists that spoke about making records, and I can't think of the name of the trumpeter, but her husband was an opera singer, and they were in the Victor studios and they were recording, and he was just a little too powerful, and she said the fella came out and he says he spinneth the needle. And so they said we're going to have to use the Caruso method, and they packed the horn with cotton,
Hmm.
and makes you wonder. I mean, you get remarkable recordings acoustically, but how much better could they have made it?
Mm,
That's the great question. I mean, the ones they rejected because they were too good.
Yeah.
There are examples. There's a recording of Caruso that was never released because it's too well done,
Yeah.
which I should try to find a copy, put that
yes,
on my
please.
machine.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
That would be interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
more questions.
Yeah.
If you have anything else to say, please.
No. Well, I can talk forever about acoustic recordings. So,
True.
it's I know nothing in particular springs to mind, I must admit.
Well, then let me ask you a question
Yeah.
here about recording. That when you play, what company, in your opinion, made the best acoustic recording?
I was just gonna ask that.
Mm, um, Edison, hands down. Edison.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a shame. A lot of people on this side of the pond wouldn't have heard a diamond disc. An acoustically recorded diamond disc is just superb.
Oh, yeah.
Um, how much of it is down to the recording technique? How much of it is down to the playback technique? You know, that's that's also a question because you have to keep in mind that 100-year-old 78 is mostly tired and worn out, whereas diamond discs are usually a lot better. Uh,
Sure.
but yeah, diamond discs.
Okay.
Fantastic response.
I'm
Yeah.
inclined to agree because, you know, I have just something that's going to spur something in your mind about playing is I remember Theodore Edison talking about records. And when he talked about the old records, and he said people listen to these records and say they sound old. He said they didn't sound old when they were new. And he said that perhaps over time, the material has changed. the components, the what's the word I want to use? The material itself
Yeah.
has morphed into something that it never was.
Mm-hmm.
And what once sounded like a new record sounds like an old record today.
And that's a question I ponder, Jack. So, 100 and some records are 120 years old by this point, and more than 120 years old. How much longer will they be around? So do they have a
Very
shelf
good
life?
question.
Yeah, do they? Because I'm quite confident whoever made them had no intention of them lasting this long,
No,
or even half this long. So, will we 100 years down the line, will they all just crumble to dust because they're just their natural life? Who
yeah,
knows?
agreed. It's an
Mm.
interesting thing I found, especially with Columbia records. I've held many of them, and they've turned to dust in my hand. The discs. But the thing that I'm wondering is, and maybe it's the project like Don Wilson is doing, this project of copying, it might become like a national thing that should be
Mm.
done to preserve our audio history before it crumbles into dust. That might be something. That would be a wonderful
Yeah,
objective.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
yeah.
agree.
Hopefully that'll never happen, but
We'll see.
I know, I know.
it is a
It's a
question
pipe
to ponder.
dream. It's a pipe
Yeah,
dream. It's a
Yeah,
pipe
it is a
dream.
yeah,
pipe
I
dream.
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But what will the
Now,
collector 100 years from now do?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, are you a musician at all, Ahmed?
No, I
Really?
am not. No, not at all. More often than not, I find myself in the company of very fine musicians like yourself.
Okay.
And no, I don't play anything. I don't sing anything. I
Interesting.
just enjoy the music. I did attempt to pick up an instrument at some point, but quickly accepted that I'm better off just listening.
Which instrument was that?
There was a keyboard with the idea of transitioning to a piano at some point.
Yeah.
However, I have zero patience, and I really mean I have negative patience. Uh, and picking up any sort of instruments obviously requires a stupid amount of dedication, and patience, which I just do not have. So I just enjoy them being played.
Yeah. That's a good response. Because this is a very musical hobby, and not everybody has to be a musician. You can just
No,
simply enjoy it, and that's a very
well,
good
yeah,
point.
no, yeah. And to be fair, to have musicians, you also have to have a good audience as well, don't you? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Perfect. I love that. Beautiful.
Well, I think the hobby is in very good hands.
Absolutely.
In many respects, there's a lot of collectors. If you go to the shows, it's a fascinating thing to see. It's a very mature audience. I mean, I recognize everybody there, and every time I see them, they get another shade of gray at the gatherings, and it's always nice to see, young and dedicated collectors who will definitely have an amazing influence on the future in both your cases.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very kind of you to call me young as well.
In
I
my
mean, you
case,
are.
everybody's young,
Exactly. Well, that's very nice. Thank you, Jack. That was a very nice comment.
but it's
Um,
true. It's
yeah,
very true and heartfelt.
yeah, that's true. You're the tinkering world of phonograph is safe in your hands. The future of tinkering and the future of reproducer tinkering, soundbox tinkering, machine tinkering. Absolutely, it's very safe with you. It's in your hands. So yeah,
Very kind of you. Thank you.
of course.
It is. It
Um,
is. It is that niggling bit when you put something on and you're listening to it and you go, but no, I'm confident I can squeeze a little bit more performance out of you. I'm not entirely sure how, but I can squeeze a bit more performance out of you, and you end up with a weekend doing various things, and one of which works, which is always
mhm,
good.
true. One more
Sure.
question. Do you
Oh,
what?
sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jack. Do you what brand of steel needles do you use?
Steel needles. So I order them from the chap in Holland. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name of the shop. It translates to something like the Black Ship. However, I'm confident they're the same ones that SoundGen sells in the UK. And I'm
Okay,
also
good.
confident. So you know the ones.
Yes.
Oh, right, fab. I
Yeah, the
was,
SoundGen needles. Yeah,
yeah.
because they're tapered rather than straight than a point. So
Yes, yeah. I'm confident they're one and the same. Um, but I tend to get them from Holland instead, just because he sells them in huge quantities. So I can get a box of 2,500 instead of a box of
right.
500.
Yeah, that's true. I've been thinking of getting some SoundGen needles. I don't know why I don't use them,
They're
but
brilliant. They're really good.
yeah, I need to get myself some. Now, are they only in the UK?
In what sense? Well, I mean, you can export them, but
Yeah,
I
you
know,
can. Okay, I was just double
yeah,
checking because I remember I forget where they're based. I'm trying to remember where
yeah,
they're
yeah,
like. Trying to
yeah.
remember
So
where.
they're British made,
That's what I. Yes, they are
and
British made, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just double check. Yeah, I need to because shipping here would be a little expensive, but it's worth it for such a good steel needle, So
Well,
A
it's
question.
rare that I use steel needles. Oh, sorry, Jack.
Oh, that's all right. No, wait. I'm going to get this question out. I'm going to, before I
Yeah.
forget it here. Um, and this should have been asked earlier, but what is the genesis of your interest in music? You're not a musician, as you said. You like to listen to it, but you have a
That's
very
interesting.
unique take on music, and obviously there has to be a phenomenal influence to have reached you to bring you to this point.
That is a really interesting question, Jack. I've always had an interest in music. I mean, since I was a little kid. And funny enough, even as a little kid, I used to tell the other kids, "Oh, what you're listening to is rubbish." Yeah, I kid you not. That's not just a new new thing. So growing up, I'd listened to all sorts of world music and all sorts of weird and wonderful genres just to hear what's out there. And luckily, I was growing up just as the internet was picking up. So I had access to all of that. So I had access to whatever I fancied, I can just pick it up, and there it was. Satellite as well. So satellite had spent hours on all sorts of random channels from random parts across the world, just listening to what they've got. Uh, hasn't answered your question. The why bit, I don't know the why bit, but that's what I've always done. So it's interesting. That will leave me. Yeah, I'll be thinking about this one for a while.
Okay,
But
sorry
it's
about
it's
that.
something it's something it's something I've always done. Yeah, it's something I've always done. Um,
But it
yeah,
is a fascinating thing when you
it
think about it.
it absolutely is. Yeah. So since forever, so it's um sorry, the clock will finish eventually. Yeah, so since forever, I've sort of always listened to the voice as an instrument, if you see what I mean.
Okay.
So all the other kids will be listening to whatever pop or whatnot that was playing on the radio, or yeah, and it would have been radio in my time. Whereas I'd be out and about looking up all sorts of random stuff, languages that I didn't understand or had any interest in learning, but just because the rhythm of them, and that's the particular rhythm of the language, the way they sing it, the way the singer performs it. Um, um, it just conveys emotion and conveys the idea, even if you don't understand a word of what they're talking about.
Mhm.
You get it, and that was it, and that's always been it. So it can be a piece of opera, you know, an aria or what have you, and I'm confident, even if you've never listened to opera before, if you don't understand the context whatsoever, but listen to something like as old as Liebestod, you'll get exactly what's going on. You know, you and that's it. So that's the essence of it for me. It's the power of music to convey emotion in a way that you just couldn't do any other way.
Mhm. Very good.
That's really cool. That's
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
well, Gavin.
Yes.
It's like a newscast here. Um,
This is like a newscast. Yeah, speaking of the news, the weather here is, I don't know about you in Chicago or in England, but it's very, very hot here in Massachusetts on Cape Cod. So I don't know if it's affecting you
It's
guys, but I'm
hot.
starting to get a heat stroke.
Hot is relative, but it's stupidly hot here at the moment for us anyhow.
Right.
It reached something like 30 degrees last week, and for us 30 degrees is like
that, yeah,
holy, yeah,
yeah.
that's a bit much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
One of these
very hot
days,
here.
one of these days, remind me. I want to sit down and talk to you about opera.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Because I spent a lot of time with two major opera singers years ago as I was growing up, Franco Corelli and Jerome Hines.
Wow.
And I used to just sit with them and they just talk about music and they talk about singing, and we'd pull out old records and they would comment on it. And I would mark the one side of the records with their comment. And it's interesting. That was a genesis for me to become interested in opera, was their love of their careers and their work.
That's brilliant. And I don't know why, as you're saying that, I remember the clip of, and if you haven't seen it, do look it up. A clip of the Trezzini listening to Caruso playing. It is on YouTube. Do look it up, and it's just the most amazing thing ever. So it's the Trezzini sat listening to the
Oh, I
recordings.
know that one. Yes, and she
Exactly.
starts singing.
Oh
Oh,
God, that
and
is
she's like,
just, it is just the most beautiful thing ever.
and that laugh.
And that, yes, and that's it. You know, that is it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing, and I don't want to go too much into this, but Caruso used to treat Tetrazzini with his special throat stuff to clear
Oh,
any kind
did
of
he?
problems.
Yeah.
And he used to balance her. And if you have to think about the size of Tetrazzini, I mean, she was a big soprano, and he used to balance her on the edge of the tub, holding her foot and keep telling her to say "ah."
That's
It's amazing.
interesting. I read her biography. Well, yeah, it was My Life in Song.
Yeah.
Beautiful, but none of that is mentioned there. My Life Off song. None of that was mentioned there. Interesting.
Well, something, Corelli told me the favorite soprano for him was Tetrazzini.
Mhm.
She's fantastic.
Yeah. You've never heard a voice like that on record.
You can just hear the joy of what you can hear, that smile behind the horn. You can hear that's someone who's enjoying what they're doing, and they're just doing it naturally. There isn't anything that's being forced. There isn't anything that's rehearsed. She's just
No,
coming.
no.
Yeah, she's just coming down to the recording as as one does, and having fun doing it. And you can hear that, and that's
Yes.
just beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how you
They
can
searched
tell a
for
good, yeah.
Melba or something like that.
Yeah. That's how you can tell a good performer from the acoustic era, is if you can hear their smile, and joy through their singing, just quite frankly, and that's amazing.
Which I
So,
don't think you can get now,
nope.
because there is so much cut this bit from here, cut this bit from there, and throw it all up in a computer that just gives you something completely different coming out of it. It's
Right.
just you couldn't possibly get that.
No, not at all.
It's the purest form of recording.
It
if
is.
you think about it. It's pure. It's it's the closest thing to the singer themselves, because the sound is created by
Mhm.
the grooves themselves are made by the power of that being. I mean,
Right.
it's an amazing thing when you think about it. I mean, when you get into electronics, it's all diffused, but acoustic recording is that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I'm trying to think if we have anything else. We've talked about quite a lot,
Ooh.
you know,
I was
and
going to mention the needles
oh
because you
yes,
mentioned about the steel needles, but it's quite rare that I use a steel needle actually.
are you a
99.
cactus needle user?
So it's BCN's Burmese color needles
Me too. Me too.
because you can tune up a soundbox as much as you want to, put it on the fanciest machine that you want to, but if your needle is wrong, well,
Yeah, exactly.
what's the point of it all?
Right.
Yeah, so it's the BCNs I use 99.9% of the time.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I agree with you. Yeah. Agreed. Um, yeah, I think I don't know. I'm not sure if we have anything else to discuss. We've really
Sure, kind of
discussed.
questioned out here.
Yeah, we're dry. We're running dry.
Brilliant.
Now,
I would,
me and Jack and I have learned a lot in this episode. So I'd really like to give you a big thank you, Ahmed, for sharing your wonderful.
No, and thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm very, very happy to have you as our first guest, because having you as our first guest will introduce every other guest that we have on here, So you are a very special first guest.
If my camera was a bit better, you'd see me blushing, but
No, it's
and we
great.
start with the letter A.
Yeah, exactly.
Double A as well. So yeah.
Yes. Oh, that is phenomenal. So,
Yeah,
um,
this is really great and really appreciate it. And truly, I mean, we're you are, as I said before, you're going to have such an influence on this whole hobby,
mhm,
and it's just going to be fun to follow you.
yeah,
Very kind of you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
absolutely. Well,
Right.
thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been Cutting the Grooves of History with your three sharp needles, Gavin, Jack, and Ahmed. So we will see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
Take care.